My name is Tom Skarlinski. I'm a USDA identifier in the Port of Miami. I also specialize in identifying Thysanoptera. Now we're going to go ahead and try to identify another Thysanoptera that was dropped on our desk. We've already slide prepared it. We're going to go ahead and use this abbreviated key that we have for this training video. First, we're going to look at the abdominal segment, the final abdominal segment. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Is it tubular in form or is it conical? Well, you can take pretty much to discern that it is conical, shaped like an upside down cone. Let's go ahead and take, we can see the ovipositor readily on this magnification, and we can vaguely see the serrations in the ovipositor. So we can pretty much determine that this is a Terebrantia. So let's go ahead and scoot on down to couplet 7. And let's take a look at the antennal segments 3 and 4. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll do a little counting here. There's segment 1, 2, 3, segment 4. So what we want to do is we want to look at the sensory cones. Are they emergent? Do they come out of the antenna, or are they integrated into it and they're part of the actual antennal segment? But we can see, let's go ahead and look at that one on antennal segment 3. We have these sensory cones. They're kind of U-shaped, like a bull's horns, right here, attached. So we have emergent sensory cones. Okay, let's take a look at the opposing couplet. Are they non-emergent, or are they actually part of the antennal segment? We saw that are unknown, actually they come out of the antennal segment. But here's an example of a linear or longitudinal sensory area that's actually integrated. It's actually part of antennal segment 3 and 4. And this one is right here. It kind of comes up along and it starts to arch around apically right here. So it's pretty clear that we have the emergent sensory cones. So we can go ahead and let's move on to couplet 9. What we want to do is just look at the legs. You can choose any, the tibia, the femur of either legs, the forelegs, mid legs, or hind legs. We'll just go ahead and try to find one which we can easily focus on. So let's use the anterior femur here. And what we're looking for, are there transverse rows of microtrichia? In other words, going this way in this direction, and these small seedy wannabes, or almost like razor stubble, very small. And I don't see any. I don't see any small seedy. We do see some larger seedy, for example there, but that's not what a microtrichia is. Okay, here's an example of transverse rolls of microtrichia. You can see these small seedy and transverse rolls. In other words, they're going across something that would be, say, longitudinal, would go the length of the femur. But these are going in the other direction, and they're very small microseedy, if you will, microtrichia, microseedy that are in these rolls. So our unknown that we saw before doesn't have that character state. So let's proceed then to the next couplet, the metathoracic endopherca. And we're almost there. So just to give everybody an orient, we've got the head, pronotum, and this area right here. would be our mesonotum. And as we go posterior, we have the metanotum here. And this structure, the endofurca, is seen on the, it's actually on the ventral side. And it's this area right here. And is it large and extending into the mesothoracic area? Well, if we focus back to our dorsum, our mesothoracic area would be somewhere up in here. So we can pretty well determine that this endofurca, it's not stretching up to this area here. Here's an example of the enlarged metothoracic endofurca. You can clearly see that we focus to the this would be our mesonodal area here. You can see that this is up in the mesonotum, and they're very long. In the publications, they call these lyre-shaped, and similar to like a sickle. And there are these paired arms in the center. They're very long, so it's pretty clear we don't have this character state. Now, it's a terminal antennal segment. It's not long and acute. In other words, this is kind of short. Now let's go ahead and look at the antenna. And let's go ahead and do this. This is something I always like to do. Usually I'll just kind of take a quick note on any specimen I get. I'll usually just quickly do an antennal segment count. So it's and I usually kind of do an inventory of the insect, of the thrips, when I first look at it. And this is one thing I always do. So I'll try to get an antennal segment count. So we've got our basal antennal segment 1, 2. Here's our 4th antennal segment, 5th, and 6. And then the final one here is 7. And another thing that thrips, sometimes there's incomplete development or some type of something happens, and one antenna may have more segments or less segments than the other one. And this is not a perfect world, and everything's not always perfect. So in that case, what you almost have to do, if, for example, the key you're using, you have to say, well, all right, I'm going to say this has, say, 7 antennal segments. But if it has 8 antennal segments, you have to go that route in the key as well. Getting back to what I was talking about, our terminal antennal segment is not long and acute. It's fairly blunt. It's rounded on the tip. Okay, here's an example of where the terminal antennal segment is long and acute. Notice that it's wider basally, and then it comes to a very acute point, and it's very to sharp point, or this acute point. So our unknown doesn't have this character state. So our unknown doesn't have an enlarged metothoracic endofurca, and the antennal segment is not long and acute, but it is rounded. So we can confidently go to the next couplet 11. We'll go ahead and look at an example of a specimen with reticulate sculpture in the head and legs. Here we are with the head. We can see all the reticulation all over the head here. And let's check out the legs. It's a little more difficult, but we can see the cells there indicating reticulation here. And we're pretty reticulate there. So a look at our unknown. Okay, let's take a look at the head of our unknown. We can see that we do have sculpture, but it's transverse and a nice little lines of sculpture. It's not reticulate. In other words, there's not closed cells. And then we look at the legs. They have some striations, but clearly there's no closed cells or heavy reticulate patterns. And that we had already determined that our unknown didn't have a long acute terminal antennal segment. We do not have reticulation, so we have a thripini. So we can move to, so let's go ahead and move to couplet number 12. Couplet number 12 are the abdominal tergites with rows of fine microtrichia. Here's an example of some fine microtrichia. The abdominal tergites. And this is an example of a species with that. Or actually a species from a subfamily that has this character. Look at it. Let's go ahead and point at these microtrichia, these small, they almost look like lines, but they're actually small miniature CD all along here. Obviously you can see a typical CD. It's really manyfold longer than the microtrichia. Let's go ahead and look at our unknown. And let's look at the abdominal tergites, the structure, the integument on the tergite. Okay, let's get our focal plane adjusted here. And we can see that here in the lateral margins, there's some striations, but there are no small microtrichia all along these regions. So we can pretty much, we can go ahead and move on to couplet 13. And we want to look at the ocellar CD. Go ahead and explain the ocellar CD. It's pretty obvious that based on the name ocellar CD, they're in the region of the head where the ocelli are. These are the hind ocelli. And there's a single ocellus here, create like a triangle in this area. And within this area of the head, we're either going to have 3 pairs or 2 pairs. And sometimes I've seen there are some genera of thripini that have even more. They may have as many as 4 pairs. So let's go ahead and get a count on these CD. Right here, and we can barely see it. You can see them, they're kind of bent. This would be ocellar CD3. And ocellar CD3 is usually within this area of the ocellar triangle. And then ocellar CD1, if it's present, it's going to be just anterior of the anterior ocellus. So they should be popping up right in this area here. And I'm not seeing this pair of CD. And ocellar CD2 is usually off just a little bit lateral. I don't know. I have a little trouble focusing. I can just see a shadow of one right here. And there's one right about here. There it is. Right there's one, and right there's one. Now, this is actually a great example of everything is not always easy, and sometimes you slide mount these specimens, and the head might rotate and forward a little bit, and it can be very difficult to see these structures. If your specimen is not cleared very well, then to see these things, to be able to focus in on them and see your things in your different focal planes, it becomes very difficult. So it's really helps to have a good clear specimen. There we can see the ocellular CD3, the 2, 1 is absent. The opposing couplet is saying head with 2 pairs of ocellular CD, 1 is absent. So we've already determined that. Ours are absent. We don't have 3 pairs of ocellular CD. So let's go ahead and take a look at the position of this ctenidia. The ctenidia are these small structures on Turgut 8. And we want to look at the orientation of these. What we're looking for here in our unknown, we have our spherical right here in this spot. And then this is our row of ctenidia. So what we want to know is this row of the ctenidia anterior or medial? Its orientation to the spherical, is it medial? The opposing couplet is saying, is it anterolateral? Would it be in this area? Well, ours is clearly medial in relation to the spherical. Okay, in this final pair, this couplet, we're asked, do the forewings have a complete row of venal CD with 2 complete rows, or are these rows incomplete? In particular, is the first row incomplete? So our unknown here, we'll notice that basally on the wing, on the first vein, so here's the first vein, and then along here is the second vein. We have a nice row starting here, and then there aren't any CT, and then one appears here. As we get our focal plane, we have a few scattered ones here. So they're incomplete. We can always do a double check on this too to see, and we can take some, go ahead and increase the magnification. At least the reason that I'll do it is I just want to really confirm that this isn't just some of the CD were knocked off during preparation, so we can clearly see that there's a CD there, there's a CD there. Now, if that was the case, that the CD were knocked off during the slide preparation or the manipulation of the specimen, we would see a cedal base, not the actual cedal base, but its insertion point. We'd see a round circle here, maybe a round circle here, but I'm not seeing anything. So it's clearly these CD are absent here. So now we've established that we have 2 pairs of ocellular CD. This CD1 is absent. The ctenidia of abdominal Turgut 8 is medial to spherical. The forewings have a gap in the first venal CD, and earlier when we did our antennal segment count, we had already established that this specimen has 7 antennal segments. And last but not least, let's go ahead and look at the pronotum. And we don't need we have about 200 times magnification here. And what we're looking for are the long CD, not only on the hind margin of the pronotum, but are they on the anterior margin as well? Well, I'm not seeing any on the anterior margin, but there are long CD on the posterior margin. So we can go ahead and move to couplet 18. And what we've done is we've at least determined to this point that we have a specimen from the genus Thrips. Okay, so now what we're going to look at is we're going to determine what species of Thrips we have. And in couplet 18, the abdominal sternites and pleural turgites without discal CD. All right. Okay, so here we are. I'm actually on an abdominal turgite. And the question is asking about the abdominal sternites. So let's go ahead and change our focal plane to the sternite. And here's our sternite. Well, these discal setae on the sternite are going to be in this area right here. Discal meaning kind of like center, you know, and it's kind of it's a rough word. In other words, discal. It's not on any margin or very outlying. It's in this central area of the sternite. So we do not have any small setae or accessory setae in that area. The other characters, we're going to look at the pleural tergites. Now the pleural tergite is on the side right here. And I've always found that this is a structure, an actual character that's difficult to see. And what I try to do to orientate myself is, here I am, I'm on the dorsum. Go ahead and move laterally. And if you'll notice, and I'll show you this a little bit more, there's lines of sculpture, and they extend along the tergite, and then they go in this direction. Well, what will happen as we change our focal adjustment, we go to the venter more, or we move to the ventral side, you'll see that this same plate here are lines of sculpture have changed direction. Okay, and what happens is, because this is actually a three-dimensional insect, and we've kind of squashed it down, so that pleural tergite, which are normally in nature, those lines of sculpture are going to pretty much, they're going to roll in the same direction. In other words, in nature, in a full specimen, it's going to go this way and down and around, but when you squash this pleural tergite down, they change direction. So we're on the pleural tergite here, and as I said before, this discal or central area, there are no setae present. Let's go ahead and look at the comb on tergite 8. And the question is the comb long and complete? Well, here we are on tergite 8. Okay, let me get this positioned. And this Skarlitsky guy really did a bad job making this slide, but here's our comb. Okay, so the actual tines of these setae, or these are actually like a long microtrachea, where they have small triangular bases, but you can see how long and fine they are. They're very close set, and it fills up this entire area from margin to margin. So it is complete. Okay, here's the opposing couplet, and with the accessory setae on the sternites and also on the pleural tergites. So here we have the tergite. Let's go ahead and we'll go over to move our focal plane to the ventral side. Actually, in this specimen, okay, I'm going to go ahead, I want to get another specimen that we can show you that. But as far as the pleural tergites, you can see that here we are on the pleural tergite area, and you can see that we're at this focal plane, our sculpture's running this way. So we go ahead and change focal plane, and you notice the sculpture starts to move in this direction. We know, all right, we're on the pleural tergite. And in this case, in this specimen, you can see there's additional CD in this area. And these are those discal CD on the pleural tergite that we were talking about in the key. Okay, here's a tergite from a specimen that we can clearly see. Well, not right now because we're on the tergite, but we will be able to clearly see what these accessory CD on the sternite look like. So let's go ahead and change our focal plane to the ventral side or the sternite, and you see all of these CD. In addition to the marginal CD, we have these CD here, and these are our accessory or discal CD that we were talking about. So in our unknown, we've pretty much established that there are no discal CD in the abdominal go ahead and get a picture. Here's our unknown. So we pretty much know there are no discal CD on the sternites or the pleural tergites. Okay, so now what we're going to do is move on to couplet 19, and we're going to look at tergite 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and this right here, this is tergite 1. So we need to move just a little bit further south, and I believe that's tergite 1. And now we're on tergite 2. And this is tergite 2 right here. What we're looking for is how many lateral CD are there. So we have to focus in, adjust our focus, and we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 lateral CD. 1, 2, where'd the other one go? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 lateral CD. In the first part of the couplet, it says tergite 2 with 3 lateral CD. Here again, it's always good if you can. It doesn't always work out, but if you can, we can try to focus in on the other side too, because you can get anomalous specimens that are not going to be perfect. They're going to have maybe 3 on one side and maybe 4 on the other side. But usually we will find the same characters on both sides. But here again, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're pretty confident we've got 4 lateral CD. And here we are with the abdominal tergites again, the pleural tergites. Go ahead. You notice then the sculpture changes direction. The question is there fine rolls of microtrachea? If we look here, there are no rolls of fine microtrachea. And the metaform, campaniform sensilla are present or absent. Well, let's go ahead and take a peek on our unknown. And these campaniform sensilla are these little round circles right here, these little circles. They are present. So it looks like we have Thrips palmi. Our tergite 2 has 4 lateral CD. Abdominal pleural tergites are without microtrachea. In other words, they don't have rolls of microtrachea. And the metanodal campaniform sensilla are present, which these are. So we have Thrips palmi.